Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We are currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the planning step D for data design. All right, so let's go right to your homework. Your homework is to lay out the data into groups. They'll eventually become tables and models. Now, you may find that your models are a little bit different or your tables are a little bit different, but these are your basic data grouping. That's what the design is all about. Then identify the data relationships. So if you have a piece of data, you got to figure out, is there any other related data to this that maybe should go together? I'm not talking about things like a one-to-many relationship or linking two groups of data together. That's not what I'm talking about with relationships. Relationships here represents the idea that a first name is related to a last name, and they should probably be stored together. That's the kind of relationship you're talking about. If you have an email address, where is it most likely to be related to? Probably not the address record, probably the user record, the person record. Okay, so there's the relationship we're talking about, is the idea of we're going to identify pieces of data and then put them into groups or categories. Okay, and from there, we can develop our tables and our models. All right. So that's the homework. Go ahead and do that, and then come on back after you're done. Okay, so pause the video right here. All right, I'm going to assume you are done. So let's go over to OneNote, and here I have our basic requirements. So let's talk through data. So we're going to create a couple different categories of data. Let's start by reading down through our requirements. So start and end date, these are search values. We don't need to capture those. We'll capture them later when you book a room. But if you don't book a room, there's no reason for us to capture that you searched for this start date and this end date. All right, so let's look at this next line. Display a list of hotel room types. That seems like a room type would be one category. So let's change this and we'll say room type. Now, what would go into a room type? And again, we're not going to worry about things like IDs or what the type is, like an int or a string. Don't worry about that. Just worry about the actual data. So what goes into a room type? I think the basic answer here is a title and a description. So a title would be junior suite or two queen bedroom, all right, or one king room. And then the description would be much more, would expound on that. So it'd say, one king room. The description would be, this room has 800 square feet and it's got one king size bed and it may have a partial view of the ocean. I don't know. But that's the description, a little more full explanation of what this type of room is. So a title and a description. Now, we're also going to need probably a cost. Now, we haven't talked too much about price or tracking that, but I think we probably should put a price here. So this would be a price, and that'd be a price per night. Now, typically, hotels don't just charge one flat rate for all of time. They tend to say, okay, this is a season, so this is the busy season, therefore the prices are more expensive. This is the down season or the off season, therefore the prices are lower. There also may be a weekend rate versus a weekday rate. If business travelers use this hotel, maybe it's a little more expensive during the workday or during the work week versus the weekend, where it's not quite as expensive. Or maybe the reverse is true. Maybe this is a destination hotel. Therefore, the weekends are more sought after, therefore more expensive. That all sounds great, but that sounds like it's not a minimum viable product. Now, we have to have a price because people aren't going to book a hotel room if they don't know how much it's going to cost. But we don't have to have variable pricing. We can just say, you know what, there's the price. Honestly, they could go in and start making changes if they wanted to. So if they decide to put all the rooms up by 10%, they could do that. But it's not the overall best solution yet. They're going to probably want to have in version 1.1 or soon thereafter that variable pricing. All right, but I think this is good for a minimum viable product, is that price. Now again, this highlights we had an assumption we didn't really talk about, which was that we'd capture price, we display price. And so that goes back to the O step where we probably should have talked about that a little more. All right, so I think that's all for room type. All right. We also have an implied fact. We have rooms. So let's add rooms down here. I'll change my font size first and say rooms. So let's bold and underline that. And so this rooms grouping probably has a room number. Probably also has a room type. Okay, which that type is going to link to this room type right here. But I'm just going to call it room type for now. All right, what else does a room have? For an MVP, maybe nothing. Because for an advanced type, maybe you could have things like currently unoccupied or the actual items that are in there. So it has a microwave, it has this, it has that with serial numbers. Okay, so this is the microwave, this is a serial number. So let's just say someone stole the microwave. Well, we could report that and say, okay, well, this room had this microwave in it, and here's a serial number. That may be something we could add later. That's not a minimum viable product, though. So therefore, I think the room number and the room type gives us everything we need. So that's all I'd put in rooms for now. Now, we have another implied thought here when we have the search for room. Display a list of hotel rooms that are available. So we need to know that if a hotel room is booked for a certain date and time, or a certain date at least. So let's create another table down here. Let's do it up here. And we're going to, again, set the right font size. And we're going to say, let's call this the bookings table. And flag. So you probably a Boolean, something like that, or a bit in SQL, where we just say, hey, this person's already checked in. So we know if they've checked in or not. Now, as far as cost goes, do we capture that in this table as well? So this is the total price. I think we do. Total cost. And do we keep track of paid I don't think so. This is a minimum viable product. So if they've checked in, we have to assume they've also paid. So they're part of the process. Again, that's probably something to put on the version 1.1 though. So that seems like it's all we need, but let's look at guests and come back and make sure we've covered everything. So let's add one more here, and we'll say this is the guests table. And we're going to say this person has a first name and a last name. Is there anything else we need to track about this guest? I don't think so. I don't think we need to know about their address, their phone number, their email address. Those are all future desires. Now, I think that means we have all of our data. So let's walk through our application and see if any more data pops up as necessary. All right, so we're searching for a room. So we're going to display a list of hotel room types. We have hotel room types that are available. That means we need to know which ones are available, which ones are not. Well, we have a list of rooms, and we have a list of who's booked the room and for when. So we have to look through a list and say, okay, which entries here fall outside of our date range, so that this date range doesn't overlap, which ones are not booked. Okay, we'll find a list of, let's say, 20 rooms. And they can list, okay, those 20 rooms, there's these two types. So therefore, these two types of rooms are available for the range you specified. So we can do that with these three tables. For booking a room, that's just adding a record to this table. So that's fine. We have a start date and the end date. We know who the guest is. We know what room they want. And they're going to say, no, they're not checked in yet. And here's the total cost based upon the price of the room times the number of nights. Okay, so they can book a room. Now, on the actual, or at least search for a room to book, and they can book a room as well. They can take the search results, enter the guest information, that's the first and last name, and then book the book upon submission. So they submit the form saying, I've already selected the room, I've given you a start and end date, and here's my information. That satisfies these four properties or four values, and we know they're not checked in, and we can calculate total cost based upon the start and end date. So we actually have 5 out of the 6, and the 6th one's always going to be, no, they're not checked in yet. So that takes care of our web application. Our desktop application, we're going to search for the user. So search by last name and today's date for the check-in. So the guest, we have last name, and we have the start date is going to match up to today's date. So if they're checking in, that start date and today's date should match. So we have that information. That should give us a list of bookings, along with who is booked and what the end date is, what the total cost is, and if they're checked in or not. So that should give us everything we need for our search and our display. And the button to check in is going to mark this as checked in or true. That's it. We have now planned out our data. This is really not a lot of data. Only 4 tables. Most of them are pretty simple. There is going to be some complex querying. We're talking about searching for a room that links to a guest and searching on booking that links to a room that links to a guest that links to a room type. That can be a little bit trickier, especially when we're talking about finding which ones are available. Because that start and end date range, we're going to have to do some calculations there. So that might be a little tricky. Also, don't forget that the end date can be the same as somebody else's start date. So if I check out on the 1st, somebody else can check in on the 1st as well to that same room because I'm checking out in the morning, then the housekeeping is going to prepare the room, and then somebody else can check in to that same room in the afternoon. So we'll have to make sure we watch out for that. But in general, this is not a overly complex data solution. All right? And that's a good thing. You want your minimum viable product to be pretty small at first. Now notice there's room for expansion here. You can add more information about a guest. You can capture their email address or even a list of email addresses. Addresses, capture a list of them, no problem. They extra tables that would link to guest. But for now, we're not going to do that. All right, this is our minimum viable product for the data design step. All right, so hopefully you got that. Hopefully you got something similar and you didn't have a whole lot of extra stuff or missing stuff. But if you did, think through it again, practice it again, try and make sure that you've thought through your application. Once you've done that, come on back for the next lesson.